In the heart of Botswana's Moremi Game Reserve, where wild beauty and the harsh laws of survival go hand in hand, veteran ranger Daniel Stone was on his final patrol of the day, wrapped in a familiar peace. And then, that tranquility was shattered by an enraged roar that ripped through the air. Through his binoculars, a tragic scene unfolded. A magnificent adult leopard, a proud predator, was now the prey, cornered by the collective fury of a massive buffalo herd. Powerless, Daniel could only watch as the majestic hunter was brutally executed and its broken body hurled into a murky swamp. It seemed that everything was over. But just as the lake's surface grew still, an impossibly faint sign of life suddenly appeared. Stay with this story. Daniel to face an impossible choice. Obey the ironclad laws of nature, or risk his own life to defy them for a fading soul. The old pickup truck, a machine that had become an extension of the man who drove it, moved with a familiar, rattling rhythm along the dirt roads of Botswana's Moremi Game Reserve. Its chassis was a map of 1,000 patrols, each dent a memory of a close encounter with a rhino, each scratch a story of navigating a thorny acacia thicket. At the wheel, veteran ranger Daniel Stone felt the deep, bone-settling peace that only came from being in his true home. His hands, weathered and strong, rested on the steering wheel with the same easy familiarity a musician has with a beloved instrument. He was a man not just of this land, but from it. Born in a small village on the fringes of the Great Delta, his knowledge of the wild a legacy passed down through generations, learned not from books, but from the earth itself. The afternoon sky was a spectacle of impossible beauty, a brilliant molten gold that stretched from one horizon to the other, making the world below seem sacred and timeless. The air was thick with the day's heat and the sweet, dusty scent of the savanna. From the dense tree line, the distant chirping of birds created a delicate, intricate melody, a gentle counterpoint to the rhythmic, hypnotic sound of water lapping against the nearby lake shore. For Daniel, this was the symphony of his life, a composition he knew by heart. He had spent more than 30 years as a guardian of this sanctuary, witnessing its subtle shifts and its dramatic transformations. He had seen seasons of devastating drought and seasons of glorious, life-giving rain. He had tracked poachers in the dead of night and had watched with quiet reverence as a new generation of elephant calves took their first wobbly steps. He was driving north, making a final sweep of the area just beyond the reserve's main boundary before the sun dipped below the horizon. A profound sense of contentment settled over him, a quiet gratitude for the privilege of watching over this untamed world. It was in this moment of perfect, serene tranquility that the symphony was brutally shattered. A sudden concussive bang, sharp as a rifle shot, ripped through the air, followed immediately by a guttural, enraged roar that seemed to vibrate through the very chassis of the truck. Daniel's peaceful reverie evaporated in an instant. Decades of instinct and training took over. He slammed on the brakes, the old truck skidding to an abrupt halt in a cloud of fine red dust. He turned off the engine, plunging his world into a tense, listening silence, the sudden absence of the motor's rumble making his own heartbeat sound like a drum in his ears. With a swift, practiced movement, he grabbed the heavy, battle-scarred binoculars from the passenger seat and raised them to his eyes, scanning the area with a focused intensity that missed nothing. His breath caught in his throat. To his shock, in an open field not far from the water's edge, he saw an adult leopard, a creature of supreme grace and stealth, completely surrounded by a massive, agitated herd of Cape buffalo. Daniel's mind, a vast library of wilderness knowledge, instantly pieced together the narrative of the unfolding tragedy. The leopard, perhaps young and overconfident, or old and desperate from hunger, must have attempted to prey on a young calf. It was a fatal miscalculation. There is little in Africa as dangerous as a buffalo herd defending its young, and the leopard had provoked their full, collective, and terrifying fury. He watched, his knuckles wide on the binoculars, as the herd launched its brutal retaliation. It was not a hunt, it was an execution. They charged as one, a living, thundering wall of muscle, horn, and incandescent rage. Their powerful, merciless blows sent the leopard, a predator weighing nearly 90 kilograms, flying through the air as if it were a bundle of rags. It slammed to the ground with a sickening thud, but there was no reprieve. Before it could even attempt to rise, the herd was upon it again. The animal's screams of pure, unadulterated pain were sharp and piercing, a sound of agony that was almost drowned out by the cacophony of the enraged buffalo as they bellowed and snorted. Dust swirled in a thick, choking cloud, a chaotic veil over the scene of brutal violence. Daniel gripped the steering wheel tightly, his heart pounding a frantic, painful rhythm against his ribs. Every fiber of his being, every instinct he had as a protector of this reserve's creatures, screamed at him to act. He wanted to start the engine, to charge the truck into the fray, to use the noise and the metal to scatter the herd and give the leopard a chance to escape. But his experience, a wisdom forged in the crucible of countless dangerous encounters, held him in check. He knew it would be suicide. The buffalo, consumed by their primal rage, would not hesitate to turn on his vehicle, to gore its tires and smash its frame. He remembered with a chilling clarity a young, idealistic ranger years ago who had made that very mistake trying to save a wildebeest from a pride of lions. The lions had simply moved their kill, but the ranger's vehicle, disabled by a charging elephant, had left him stranded, a fatal error in a land that does not forgive such mistakes. Daniel knew, with a certainty that felt like a stone in his gut, that if he rushed in now, both his and the leopard's lives would be at risk. He was forced to be a helpless witness. The brutal assault reached its devastating climax. The leader of the herd, a colossal bull with a scarred face and a massive fused horn boss, lowered its head and delivered a final powerful thrust. The force of the blow was immense, hurling the leopard's broken body through the air in a dreadful arc. It landed with a great explosive splash in the swampy, reed-choked waters of the lake. Having delivered their final definitive act of vengeance, the herd watched the spot where the predator had vanished. A few of them snorted, stamping their hooves, before the rage began to dissipate. Satisfied that the threat to their young was gone, they slowly began to disperse, a dark tide of muscle and horn receding back into the savanna, leaving their vanquished enemy to drown in the murky depths. The surface of the lake, so violently disturbed, began to calm. The great splash subsided, leaving only a single widening circle of ripples to mark the leopard's watery grave. Then there was silence. The water grew still, its surface a perfect, placid mirror reflecting the golden sky, as if the horrific violence of moments before had never happened. Daniel's chest tightened, a knot of sorrow and regret constricting his breath. He saw no signs of life, no struggle, no movement, nothing to suggest the leopard had survived the mauling, let alone the drowning. The brutal, unsentimental efficiency of the wild was a law he understood and respected, but it never failed to leave a bitter ache in his soul. Still, his duty was not yet done. He had to be certain. He edged the truck closer to the water's edge, his hand resting on the cool, heavy stock of the tranquilizer gun beside him. He scanned the water with a fierce, unwavering concentration, his gaze moving back and forth across the area where the leopard had sunk. For a long, silent minute that stretched into an eternity, there was nothing. The leopard was gone. Then, just as he was about to accept the finality of it, he saw it. A tiny, almost imperceptible stream of bubbles broke the surface, glinting for a moment in the golden light before vanishing. It was a faint, fragile sign, but it was enough. It was proof of a life that was, against all odds, still clinging on. In that instant, every calculation of risk, every rational thought was swept away by a powerful, overwhelming tide of purpose. This was not about observing the laws of nature anymore. This was about defiance. Without a second's hesitation, Daniel threw open the door of his truck and leaped into the muddy, waist-deep water. The shock of the cold was a violent jolt, stealing his breath. The slippery, thick muck beneath his boots threatened to trap him, sucking at his legs with each step. A strong, fishy stench, the smell of decay and stagnant water, rose from the disturbed mud, assaulting his senses. But he ignored it all, his focus absolute. Guided by the faint, sporadic trail of bubbles, he fought his way deeper into the swamp, the cold seeping into his bones, relentlessly numbing his body. He pushed through the thick, entangling reeds, his hands searching blindly in the opaque, murky water. His heart pounded with a desperate urgency. He had to find it before that last spark of life was extinguished. Finally, his searching fingers brushed against something solid, soft, and distinctly spotted. He had found it. He fumbled for a secure grip, his hands closing around the leopard's limp neck and shoulders. Using every ounce of his considerable strength, Daniel began the grueling task of dragging the heavy, waterlogged body back to the shore. It was a monumental struggle against the dead weight of the unconscious animal and the powerful suction of the mud and water. He grunted with the strain, his muscles screaming in protest, his lungs burning. At last, he stumbled onto the muddy bank and collapsed onto his knees, hauling the leopard clear of the water with a final, desperate heave. Water streamed from its beautiful spotted fur, forming a muddy pool on the ground around it. Wasting not a single precious second, Daniel rolled the animal onto its side, expertly clearing water, mud, and reeds from its mouth and nose. Then, he began the desperate work of revival, starting emergency chest compressions. Mud splashed across his sleeves and face as he pressed down rhythmically on the leopard's chest, his movements firm, steady, and powered by a desperate hope. He found himself shouting, his voice raw and hoarse, a torrent of encouragement and command directed at the lifeless form before him. "Come on! Live! You are a fighter! You did not survive the herd to die here! Live!" For what felt like an eternity, there was nothing but the sickening feeling of pushing against lifeless flesh. The leopard remained limp, its head lolling to the side. Daniel's hope began to fray, the cold reality of failure creeping into his exhausted mind. He was about to give up, to accept that he was too late, when he felt it, a flicker, a faint, almost imperceptible flutter beneath his palms. He pressed again, his own heart soaring with a wild surge of adrenaline. There it was again, stronger this time. A faint but definite heartbeat had returned. A wave of overwhelming relief, so powerful it almost buckled his knees, washed over him. Tears of exhaustion and triumph blurred his vision. He had done it. He had pulled it back from the very edge of death. But his work was not over. The leopard was alive, but it was badly, brutally injured and in desperate need of immediate medical care. Daniel scrambled back to his truck and grabbed his radio, his voice shaky but clear as he called for backup and veterinary support. Within 30 minutes, 2 other rangers arrived, their vehicle equipped with a transport cage and a comprehensive medical kit. The team worked with the seamless efficiency of long practice. They carefully sedated the weakened leopard, its breathing now shallow but miraculously steady. With the utmost care, they lifted its limp body into the transport cage and drove it back to the Central Ranger Station.
Open wounds,
There, a team of veterinarians was waiting, and they sprang into action.
Fluids.
They worked for hours to stabilize the grievously injured animal, their actions a blur of skilled professionalism. They sutured the deep, open wounds, disinfected the countless cuts and gashes, and administered intravenous fluids, powerful antibiotics, and essential pain relief. The leopard survived the long, critical night under constant, 24-hour monitoring. By the next morning, As the sun once again cast its golden light over the reserve, it weakly opened its eyes. Over the next few days, Daniel became a constant presence at the Leopard's side. His patrol routes now included a long stop at the recovery enclosure. He would bring the Leopard's food and fresh water, and then he would simply sit. He would spend hours near the cage, speaking softly to the animal, his voice a low, calming murmur. He told it stories of the reserve, of the seasons, of the other animals. He wasn't sure if the Leopard understood the words, but he believed it understood the intent, the deep well of respect and empathy in his tone. Slowly, miraculously, the Leopard's incredible strength and resilience began to show. The recovery was a series of small, triumphant milestones that Daniel cherished. First, it began to drink water on its own. A day later, it took a few tentative nibbles of the meat he offered. Soon it was eating eagerly, its body regaining the weight and muscle it had lost. The fear and pain in its eyes began to recede, replaced by a cautious curiosity. Finally, it began to pace the length of its cage, its movements no longer weak and shaky, but fluid and powerful, its intelligent eyes bright, clear, and fiercely alert. After 10 days of intensive care and rehabilitation, the veterinarians declared the Leopard fully healed. Its magnificent golden coat, once matted with mud and blood, shone once again with its characteristic, breathtaking beauty. It was fit for release. The rangers drove the Leopard to a distant, sprawling grassland, a beautiful and remote corner of the reserve, far from any human settlements and, crucially, far from the territory of the buffalo herd that had nearly ended its life. They found a perfect spot near a rocky outcrop, a place of new beginnings under the vast, benevolent Moremi sun. Daniel was the one to open the cage door. He stepped back, giving the magnificent animal its space. The Leopard emerged cautiously, its paws tentative on the soft grass. It stood for a moment, its head raised, sniffing the air and taking in the scent of its freedom. Then it turned its head and fixed its intense, golden gaze on Daniel. For a long, silent moment that stretched and became something profound, the two of them looked at each other. It was not a look of affection or gratitude in the way a human would understand it, but it was something far deeper. It was a moment of powerful primal recognition, an acknowledgement of a shared violent ordeal, a silent testament to a connection forged on the very border between life and death. Then, the moment was over. The Leopard turned, and with a powerful, fluid bound that spoke of its complete recovery, it was gone, its spotted form melting away into the tall, golden grass. Daniel stood still, his eyes fixed on the spot where it had vanished. A complex and overwhelming mix of emotions washed over him. The profound relief of a successful rescue, the quiet, deep pride in a job well done, and a small, bittersweet pang of parting. He knew he would likely never see that specific Leopard again, but the memory of its final, intense gaze would be seared into his mind forever. This rescue, this incredible journey from the brink of a violent death back to a life of freedom, would remain one of the most powerful and meaningful memories of his long and dedicated life as a ranger, a guardian of the wild heart of Moremi.